In today's episode, we're going to be talking about undergraduate research. URE versus CURE. Undergraduate research experiences, or UREs, and course-based undergraduate research experiences, or CUREs, have recently become very popular among STEM disciplines in colleges and universities in the United States. UREs are typically limited to a few students and competitive. Students who apply for UREs are typically highly interested in research, high-achieving, motivated. Students work closely with faculty, postdoctoral researchers, or graduate students during a summer semester, year, or longer. CUREs are embedded in a course as part of the curriculum and typically only last for one semester, but may span 2 or more courses. However, CUREs may put a strain on the professor teaching the course because they need to oversee many students simultaneously. Benefits. Undergraduate research offers opportunities for independent research experiences in the field of study and professional mentoring. There is evidence suggesting that undergraduate research benefits students by preparing them to become scientists, and the experience may retain students in the sciences. Furthermore, the results of an undergraduate research project may be published in a peer-reviewed journal with the students as a co-author. Today's guests will talk about the process and benefits of publishing. Mentors. What's a mentor? However, Lin et al. 2015 believe the benefits of undergraduate research have been poorly studied and that positive outcomes may be due primarily to mentoring. They state that mentoring is essential for undergraduates considering careers in the sciences, and one of the main benefits of undergraduate research may be undergraduates' close proximity to faculty, postdoctoral researchers, and other members of the lab who may help mentor the students. Mentors may serve as guides who orient the undergraduates and help them make connections among their experiences. They may also serve as role models, provide professional socialization, and facilitate the undergraduate's professional identity as a scientist. Mentor benefits. Lin et al. 2015 back up their claims by citing several studies, including one indicating that students who feel they are supported by faculty are more likely to attend graduate school, and a study indicating higher rates of attrition among students with inadequate interactions with mentors. They also cite a study indicating that students' confidence in science proficiency and their likelihood to pursue a research career correlates with the number of mentor meetings. How long? In self-report surveys, students typically rate their UREs and CUREs highly. However, in a 2011 paper by Theory et al., the authors explained that continuous participation in a URE of 3 or more semesters is required for a student to build identity as a scientist. They also explain that short-term or patchy URE involvement could have negative outcomes. At least a year. It seems that many students need at least a year to gain an adequate appreciation of concepts and techniques used in a particular lab. Lin et al. 2015 explained that during the first year of a URE, students spend most of their time setting up and conducting an experiment that leaves little or no time devoted to understanding theory, philosophy, or concepts. Furthermore, students may not be adequately trained to interpret the results. CUREs may be the cure. The level of student understanding of underlying theories and concepts may be higher in CUREs than in UREs. Theory et al. 2012. CUREs typically incorporate lectures and readings with the study of a particular research question. The added formal instruction may allow students to make connections with prior knowledge, spend more time studying the topic, and more opportunities to ask questions. However, without the adequate contact time between student and professor, the student may not view the professor as a mentor. Today's guest is a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at BGSU. He was formerly the director of the BGSU Marine Biology Lab from 1994 to 1999, the director of the Center for Neuroscience, Mind, and Behavior from 2000 to 2002, and the director of the University Honors Program from 2002 to 2012. Today's guest has been the director of the Laboratory for Sensory Ecology since 1994. The Laboratory for Sensory Ecology is a multi-disciplinary lab that is interested in any questions concerning sensory behavior, evolution, physiology, and ecology. Most of their current projects are centered on understanding the role that chemical signals play in an organism's ecological role. They have projects that range from understanding the physics behind antennae design, predator avoidance, selection of habitats and mates, dominance hierarchies, and other social behaviors to analyzing the chemical composition of these signals. He's a former professor of mine, colleague, friend, and mentor. Please welcome Dr. Paul Moore.
Welcome to the Teaching and Learning Professor, where you will find interviews of college faculty, staff, administrators, students, and alumni every week. Topics cover all aspects of formal and informal learning in higher education. The goal of this podcast is to help faculty understand the best ways to teach and for students to understand the best ways to learn. Your host is a teaching professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at Bowling Green State University. He has been faculty and the director of the BGSU Marine Lab since 1999. Now on to the show with your host, Dr. Matthew L. Parton.
Okay. Can't go longer than that.
That's the limit of the podcast.
All right, so Paul Moore, welcome to. That was a bad introduction.
Yeah, that's great. No, I'm glad to be here and glad to talk about this stuff.
So I guess I wanted to start out by asking you to talk a little bit about your background.
Sure. My undergraduate degree was University of Michigan, and that was a really kind of a general biological oceanography degree, which really focuses more on the physical processes in the marine environment than the kind of the biological processes. And from there, I went straight from undergraduate to graduate school at Boston University, straight into the marine biology program. So I have a PhD in marine biology, no master's degree, went straight through PhD. And that was basically focusing more the biology than the physical processes in the ocean. So a lot of ecology and physiology. And then from there, I did a 2-year postdoc to learn neuroscience, and then a 2-year postdoc to do more kind of neural physiology, and then came here to BG as the marine biologist.
Okay. And so you started off teaching marine biology classes, and you actually ran the marine lab, and that's when I came into the picture. I show up, psychology major my senior year. I took a class from Bob Romans, just introductory biology. It was a required class for biology or psychology major, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is so cool. I was interested in animal behavior and in about how animals learn and the brain, how their brain works, but I was sick of looking at pictures with rats with those electrodes stuck in their heads. I was like, this is not what I want to do with my life. So I promptly changed my major, and it already, had been building aquariums, kept octopus and all these corals, and that's when I came into the marine lab. And there's Paul Moore, first year, brand new.
Was that the first year?
It was your first year. Yeah, because Cindy Stong was here first. Actually, I talked to her a few times. And then it was, I think there was somebody else for a year.
There was an interim woman, and I can't remember her name. Yeah, she was interim, and then they hired me to take over in '94.
Yeah, and so I was in the lab, and that was without a doubt the highlight of my college career. I didn't leave. I just stayed. I think it was that trip to Woods Hole, Massachusetts that we took.
In spring, and it was icy and cold.
Yes, everything was frozen solid, but it was a very good experience for me. And
that's great.
And this is going to sound funny. I don't think most people probably won't relate to this, but just walking into the library, like I was just like, wow. And like I could just feel it in my whole body. It's like this is where I want to be. I want to read all these journals. I want to read every book in this place.
Right.
And
it's an incredible library. It's 120 years old, and they have journal articles on marine organisms over those 120 years, and it's so special that people actually pay money just to sit and go through the journals throughout the whole summer. And if you study marine biology, Woods Hole is just kind of like one of the 2 to 3 meccas in the world to do marine biology. So it was really special. It was an amazing place.
It was a huge influence on me. Just visiting there for 1 week, I was thoroughly impressed.
Yeah.
And I guess I asked you here today to talk a little bit about your publications, and I did a little bit of an introduction for you, which you haven't even heard yet, but I introduced you, and I didn't talk about your publications, and you have a highly successful record publishing, both in journals and in books. And I guess I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the importance of each of those. So why is it important for a faculty, a professor, to publish in journals? What's the significance of that? And then also with books, and then maybe talk about the process a little bit.
Yeah. So we make an argument to a larger society that the knowledge we generate in science is a little bit stronger, a little bit better than other sources of knowledge. So if you're going to build a house, you're going to use scientific principles in building the house versus, say, consulting a witch doctor. In both areas have knowledge, but we claim in science that our knowledge is a little bit more tested, a little bit more truer than other areas of knowledge. The reason we can claim that is the publication process. So we can do science, and a lot of people can do science. You can do science in your backyard, and you can be a hobbyist or something like that. But what is central to the process of science is once we do our research and we write it up, it gets sent out to experts, and those experts kind of give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether this is good research, good knowledge, good conclusion. So it's a ground truthing of what we do. And through that ground truthing, then our work gets published, other people read it, and then even by citing that work or doing follow-up experiments is a second step of ground truthing whether that knowledge is worthwhile or moves us forward. Without publishing, anything can be considered science or knowledge. So that is almost the foundational step for difference between science and non-science. It's the fact that our knowledge is exposed to people and they say, yes, that's good, that's worthy of publication, or no, that's not worthy of publication. So for a professor, if somebody's going to call themselves a scientist or a functional scientist, you have to publish. You have to expose your ideas to the general public of science and have them say, yeah, that's worthy, go forward, we'll fund you, we'll print your articles, we'll read your articles or cite your articles. Or in some situations, and I've had papers turned down too, where they say, this doesn't meet the standards of science, so we're not going to allow it to be published. We're not going to allow it to see the light of day and have other people read it. Without that kind of ground truthing step, just about anything goes, and we can't really claim that our knowledge is better, that we don't have a better understanding of evolution or physics or the universe or how to build bridges or cars or things like that. So publishing in peer-reviewed journals, and that's what that means, is peer-reviewed, is our peers, other scientists with the experts in the field, will read your paper and say, yeah, that's a good paper, and that's worthy of publication. And without boiling it down too simply, that's kind of the currency of science, is publication. Without publications, you haven't done anything.
So the whole process just keeps people honest and keeps people from just making stuff up and trying to, calling up the local newspaper. Yeah, I cured cancer. I'm taking interviews.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on down.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking with a colleague. I'm on an editorial board for a journal, talking to a colleague, and he basically said, if it's not published, it doesn't count. So that's a really hard line, and sometimes it's a little harsh, but it keeps people from making stuff up, and it allows us to check and review knowledge and make sure it goes through 3 or 4 steps before we acknowledge it and let people have that, and use that knowledge to do further experiments or even release it to the public, to newspapers. So that's an important part. The downside of that is the way that we write publications. It's not really accessible to a lot of people. It's kind of dry writing. It's very factual-based writing. We don't weave stories. We, like the old dragnet, stick to the facts. So undergraduates, people outside of science, have a hard time of reading and keeping track of that. So there's a disconnect between what we do as scientists and what we publish and what the public sees as an output of our knowledge. So that's why there's popular culture debate on whether vaccines do this or that, or whether climate change is real or things like that. But within the scientific community, there's no debate. We know that vaccines don't cause autism. We know that climate change is real. We know that the oceans are warming. We know that the poles are melting. And we know these types of things. Evolution, we know evolution's real. But there's this disconnect because our papers, we write for peer review and we don't write it for public consumption. So that's where other types of publications like popular science books or news articles written by scientific journalists or even scientists translate that knowledge. We have a little bit more leeway of just sticking to the facts because we want to weave stories, truthful stories, but we want to weave them in such a way that somebody can understand them and it applies to their life. So more recently, I've gotten into writing some popular science books, and I have 2 of them out that kind of explain. The first one explains chemical senses and how animals and humans use chemical senses, because I call it kind of a ninja sense. We're unaware of it. As humans, we're visual and auditory animals. We tend to ignore our sense of smell or taste until we're eating a meal, but we use it all the time to make judgments of people and really kind of navigate our world, but we just kind of ignore it. So there's a whole bunch of research in there, probably over about 500 papers that I read and had to synthesize and combine and then write stories that would capture people's imagination to kind of inform them on what we know and what we don't know. And then the second book was sort of a written take of James Cameron's Avatar, where I'm trying to put the reader inside the mind of an organism, and I cover everything from octopi to osprey to rats to a whole bunch of different animals to dolphins and seals. And I explain how they view their world through their senses. And now that's not stuff we cover in scientific publications. It's not peer-reviewed. But it contains factual information woven together with stories and popular culture and popular information, so it makes that knowledge more accessible for people.
What are the titles of those 2 books?
Yeah, the first book is called The Hidden Power of Smell, and it's really interesting that we really underplay our sense of smell. So The Hidden Power of Smell is the first one. And the second one just came out this year. It's called Into the Elusive World, with an I. And elusive is hidden world. So anybody who has a pet, you take your dog for a walk and they sniff at each tree and at the ground. And what I'm explaining is how these animals are gathering information about the world. Or if you have a cat, the cat will rub up against you, and rubbing up against you does really certain kinds of things, and the fact that cats can see at night. So Into the Elusive World, or the way that these animals view the world that we don't have access to. And hopefully by reading these books, people can understand what animals are doing and why they're doing it.
And what is the publication process? So I guess first I want to start with the journal.
Yeah.
All right. So in order for a professor to be tenured, they're going to have to go through it's incredibly rigorous amount of work they have to do to reach that level. Could you talk a little bit about what it takes to get just one article published?
Yeah. And depending on the field, we can start with the planning process, right? So you get together with your colleagues, your graduate students, your undergraduate students, and you talk about a protocol, and you have to have the right kind of controls in place, and you have to make sure the data is collected properly. But we can jump to the publication process where you have the data and you have graphs made. And almost all scientific publications have kind of 4 aspects. They have an introduction, and that's where you take your results and you talk about what problem exists that you're going to answer. And basically, we talk about a gap in knowledge. So the introduction says, this is the gap in knowledge. This is what we know. This is what's missing, and we're going to answer that. And the methods section is written such that anybody could read your project and reproduce the project. So if we wanted to check and make sure the data is correct, somebody else in a completely different university or different field could replicate your study and get the same results. The third section is called the results section, and that's where we just put the raw data out here. So here's what we found, here's the averages, here's some stats on it. And then the discussion is where we take that data and we kind of plug that gap in knowledge. We explain what we found and how we've changed the nature of knowledge and our understanding the world based on our results. So once that's written, and it can be anywhere from 15 to 30 to 40 pages, that is sent off to a journal. And then the journal editor gets that paper, they read it, And many journals can reject it right there. If the head editor says, no, I don't like this, it doesn't fit, or there's not enough quality, they reject it right away. If it makes it through that stage, it goes to an associate editor who then finds 2 to 3 experts in the field and sends them the paper. This is about a month into the process. So the month after the main editor gets it, it gets sent out to review. Then these experts in the field will read the paper, critique it, and they will say, this is good, this part's bad, I don't like this, the data don't support this conclusion. And at that, those experts in the outside field make recommendations to either to accept the paper, reject the paper, those are the two extremes, or in some way modify the paper. And that could be modified by either going back and collecting new data or supporting data or just rewriting things or doing a new analysis. That then gets sent back to the researcher, and they have the choice of either revising the paper or realizing it's not going to get published. They can just set the data aside or try to augment it. If they rewrite it, it goes through that process again. So it can go through that review process where the head editor reads it and then the associate editor sends it out to experts, and then they take those opinions and come to some conclusion 2 to 3 times on a paper. And that could take anywhere from 2 months on very quick journals up to a year on really slow journals. So it's a really rigorous process, and you can certainly respond to reviewers, but the editors know that your responses are biased. You want to get the paper out, and these experts are supposed to be unbiased experts. That it's either publishable or not, or you need to make these changes. And then once that occurs, and once it gets accepted, then there's another couple of months where they turn it into a publishable PDF, and they can add images in. And they make it publishable, and then it either comes out in hard copy or goes online. A lot of things are going online now. So that's kind of that entire process.
And so this is on top of, so you have a lab, you've got several graduate students that you oversee, and you set up projects, and you decide, hey, I'm going to do some project or try to answer some question. So how long for data collection? A year? Months?
We have a system where we do a lot of field work, so we collect most of our data in the field. So I would say from the start, from the day I first sit with a couple of students and we come up with ideas, to the moment it gets submitted is about a year. To the moment that it appears in print, which is kind of the final stage, could be anywhere from 6 months to another year. So the process could be anywhere from 2 years in total to maybe a year and a half in total.
And so about how many publications do you think, on average, most faculty, it's probably going to vary from
it varies from field to field, and it varies from lab to lab. This is probably dangerous statements to make. Most scientist colleagues I know outside of Bowling Green publish at least 1 a year, if not 2 or 3 a year. Now, that varies across institutions. So if you're at a place, a research one place like Harvard, maybe 80% of your time is research and 20% is teaching. At a place like Bowling Green, it's about 50-50. And say if you go to a couple of my former graduate students at Saginaw Valley or Grand Valley, they have 80% teaching, 20% research. So if you're at Harvard, you're expected to probably get 5 or 6 publications a year. And if you're at Grand Valley or something like that, maybe 1 a year, 1 every 2 years or something like that would be the expectation.
Okay. And so publishing a book, how is that weighted? I guess maybe I don't want to go this way.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So that is also really field dependent. So I have a good colleague over in political science, and they will not get tenure without books. And the expectation is about 3 books for tenure, an additional 3 or 4 for full professor. I think because of this peer process, the peer review process, and this kind of gatekeeping of good knowledge versus bad knowledge, books here are not valued for tenure and not really valued for promotion. And I can understand that because we're supposed to be scientists, and we can't just publish anything. It has to be good. And as you publish books, there's no really deep peer review process. So for me to publish a book, for my two books, I had to write about a 20-page proposal that described what I was going to do, had some example chapters in it, the gap in the field that's missing. Is there another book? What are the competing books? Where's this book going to be used? And that gets sent to the publisher, and the publisher will, very similar to a journal, will send that out to a couple of experts. What they're not reviewing is the quality of information, because the book is not written yet. They're reviewing whether this person has the credentials to write this kind of a book and whether this book would be useful within the field. So there's not this gate check. So after I wrote my books and sent it to the publisher, they're going, great, they turned it into a publication. So nobody is checking each chapter and making sure I'm accurate. This might be a little bit different on a textbook. That's definitely gets checked. But popular science books won't be weighted as much for tenure here.
Okay. I guess what I would like to talk about now is undergraduate research.
Yeah.
So this is something that I've always been really big in pushing on, getting our students to can figure out some way to do some undergraduate research. There's some few courses here and there that have a lot of undergraduate research embedded into them. But you took all of our Biology 2040 labs.
Yeah.
So this is a required course for every single biology major and a lot of other people that aren't biology majors. And you incorporated a undergraduate research component into the lab.
Yeah.
And I was thrilled when I heard you did that.
That's good.
I guess I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the students from day one to the end of the course go through all that process that we talked about, even writing a paper. So they meet with groups. We give them broad ideas, so like climate change or drought or pollution. And then students brainstorm about ideas. They come up with, they narrow those brainstormed ideas down, and then they come up with something they want to work on. They write a proposal. They write an equipment list. We check that. They figure out what animals they want to use, what kind of questions they want to answer, what equipment they need. We give that to them. We help them set that up. They collect the data themselves. Spend about 4 to 6 weeks collecting data. We help them analyze it. We help them graph it. And then they write it up, and we kind of peer review. We check it. We give them feedback. They rewrite it. They reanalyze it. And then at the end of the semester, they turn in papers, and they have a big poster presentation. So that whole process is designed to mimic what master's students, what PhD students, what faculty members do from start to end, so that students can understand how we generate knowledge and how we come to conclusions within the science.
Oh, that's great. So I guess I'm wondering how common is it for a introductory lab class like that to incorporate that level of undergraduate research?
It's pretty rare. And the company I wrote the lab manual with has been taking me around to universities and trying to implement this, because they do have research components, and I think components are a really important word, where they have 1 or 2 weeks where they let students do projects, but the projects are really limited in structure and scope. We throw that out. We say, it's your ideas. This is your project. You own the ideas. You come up with it, and you collect the data. And to really have students understand how we as scientists know what we know, instead of just because we said something or it was in a book, is not good enough. They have to know how we collect data, how we filter through bad data and good data, and how we draw conclusions. So it's pretty rare. But I think if you're going to be a biology major, it's essential that you get some type of research experience. So why not start them at day one? Right in the very first class or the second class they take in biology, so they can understand what research is, how they can do it, and hopefully they can get comfortable enough that they can then walk into a faculty member's office and say, man, I like what you do. Can I do research with you? Or at least feel confident enough that they can do research, they can collect data, and they know what that means. That's a kind of a scary process for undergraduates if they don't have any experience for that.
Right. Throughout your life, you've taken many, many classes and beyond your college experiences, you have taught yourself how to do many, many different things along the way.
Yeah.
I guess what I would like to know is what is your learning process? Like, so how do you think you learn best?
Yeah. So I've talked a lot with my graduate students over the last 3 or 4 years about this, and I think it comes down almost to a single word or concept, and that is failure. You have to be risky enough to try things and understand the first time you try it, you're going to fail at it. When you're a toddler and you try walking, you're going to fall over a lot. But by falling over, you're learning what not to do, and you learn where to put your hands and your legs and your arms. So when we do research, when I teach my graduate students or when I'm reading things, I try out concepts and I try out where the concepts fail and where they work. So why does it fail? And you can't be really afraid of that failure process. And when we do science, half the projects we do just fail. And that means you're learning something. Okay, that doesn't work. We can't ask that question, so let's do something else. And I think, unfortunately, we have an environment where students are afraid to kind of take risks and fail, and by doing so, they kind of limit their own learning process.
Yeah, so you're familiar with Carol Dweck's growth mindset and fixed mindset, and
Yeah.
so I guess you're kind of advocating the growth mindset where failures is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's something that's just normal part of the learning process. And
We just talked about that this morning in lab meeting, this growth versus fixed mindset. And there's so much research and there's so much anecdotal evidence that shows that failure and learning from that failure is essential process of growth. And yet on the flip side, if you fail and then you never try again, or you fail and you kind of pull within yourself, or you don't take any more risks, that's the antithesis of learning, antithesis of growth. And Carol's work, that book is an excellent book. Students should read it. If you take a risk and you say, I'm going to grow by failing and learning and failing and learning, it's essential.
so, do you have any advice for our undergraduate students? So many of the students listening to this podcast are going to be my Biology 2000 students who are brand new to the university, trying to figure out how to make things work and get through managing their time. Do you have any advice for these students?
Yeah, it's hard advice, I think, because faculty are intimidating. We sit in our offices, or we have these doctors in front of our name, or we stand up in front of 200 students, and we can be very intimidating. We have all this knowledge and experience. If there's one piece of advice that undergraduates, particularly for your biology students, is walk into our office and talk with us. A lot of us got into this kind of gig or job to teach students. And if I have a student come in my office and just says, I want to learn from you, oh man, that's great. That's why we're here. So I would suggest to your students, if something interests them, find a faculty member and just walk into their office. And sure, the faculty member may say, my lab's full, I'm busy, I can't help you. Take a chance. If they don't take you in, somebody else will. And just keep knocking on doors or walking into people's offices and say, I'm really interested in your research. Can I work with you? Can I learn from you? Can I do research with you? And that's going to be the difference between a really good undergraduate degree at Bowling Green and a bachelor's of science in biology.
What about advice for a faculty member who is considering integrating some sort of undergraduate research into their course?
It's it's interesting. So when we made this switch in 2040, we took a lot of risks because we had set labs and they worked, and students, we knew how to grade it. We knew what we were doing. When we made the switch, we didn't know what we were doing. And going back to that failure, we could have failed. And we did. We did a lot of things wrong. And I would suggest for faculty members to take the chance to give up some of that control of where that knowledge comes from and give it to the students and empower them to find questions and find ways to answer knowledge themselves. So if we can kind of switch our mindset of, instead of being professors of knowledge to facilitators of learning, I think it's easier to bring undergraduate research in, and it's easier to be learners with students and engage with them in projects. And students love what we're doing. They love the freedom it gives them to ask the questions they want to ask, to do the projects they want to do, instead of a series of canned labs that just make them follow recipes. And take the chance, and it might not work. You might have to modify it. This, I think, year 5, and we're still kind of making changes. But take the chance and see if you can jumpstart students' careers.
Could you repeat the names of your books?
Yeah, sure. The first one is The Hidden Power of Smell, and it talks about smell and taste. And the second was Into the Elusive World.
And where can we find those?
Amazon.
Okay.
Amazon.
That's where I get everything.
One of my graduate students was really excited because she saw it at Target. So I guess Amazon and Target. So,
well, Dr. Paul Moore, thank you so much for coming out here. I really do appreciate that.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Teaching and Learning Professor with Dr. Matthew L. Parton. If you like our show and want to know more, check out his webpage at blogs.bgsu.edu/teaching and learning professor. And please leave a review on iTunes, TuneIn, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you retrieve your podcasts.